Good morning, everybody. Hello. Good morning, everyone. Hello. How are you today? Glad you are here and well. Good morning. Hello, hello. I know I was 2 minutes late this morning. We were kind of fighting with a little technical stuff and then ambushed for this morning. Sometimes things just go off the rails. But it's 2 minutes either way. Back in my transportation days, they used to say that that your departure was plus or minus 2 minutes. That was always the critical movement, and uh, so I made it. We're in 2 minutes. So, good morning, Donna. How are you? I hope you're well this morning. Great. Glad to glad to see you, Karen. Good morning to you. Glad you're here. Always a joy to see ya. So, good morning, everybody. Who is everybody today? Hi, Jane. Hey, good morning. Glad you're here. Many people kind of come to us later. It's why we keep these posted online. They'll be here. They also go to our YouTube channel, FCC Fall River, so you can always catch stuff there if you don't even find it on the page. And there's always Spotify and SoundCloud for our podcast side. So good morning, driving over to set up for the biggest event of the year. Oh, are you going to the Big E? That's awesome. I hope it's the Big E. That sounds fun. I haven't been there in years. Gosh, I should scrap everything, sell everything, and go. That, isn't that what they used to say about the fair, the big fairs? Sell all that you have and go. So, good morning, Cecile. I hope you're well on this beautiful day. It's a gorgeous day in the city today. Oh my goodness, how lovely is it? I have the windows open. Just that the coolness of the fall, but it's not cold. Oh, just glorious right now. Some of the best days. All right, good morning, everybody. We're going to get going. It is the 28th day of September, this Wednesday at almost 11:11, and so glad you are with us and here to be a part of this journey. I have my little morning mug this morning. It says, "Good morning, Andy. I'll be handling your problems today, God." Uh, Bonnie Braga gave me that. It gives me great joy to drink from it. And it's also kind of snazzy and red. I like it. But I show you that to say that this was one of those mornings for me that it was just a little vibrating around the edges. I was doing too many things for too many people in too many different ways, and got a little flat-footed with our time together here. And so all of that is just to say that. That we all have those days, right? Like we all kind of confront with that, and part of what I was doing with this morning is I'm working with a church down in Florida. That is in Naples, Florida, one of our sister churches in there, the First Congregational Church of Naples. I have become friends with the pastor there, Chris Serber. He's a former Marine and just a terrific human being. We've done a couple podcasts together, which you can find some other places, and just been wonderful to deal with him. And I got to chat with him a little bit this morning as the wind was really beginning to howl down in Florida as Hurricane Ian comes ashore, and then also to have the chance to give him some help. So we were able to get some resources to him so he could actually have some stuff in hand as the days unfold to help the people in his community and his church kind of weather this time. So that's been about. So I've been, I've got all kinds of things going, and it's just been chaotic. But you know what? I'm not alone. And it's all seems like it's chaotic right now in some ways, doesn't it? I mean, and it's not just life in 22nd, in the 21st century in 2022, but it is also just life in terms of trying to negotiate all this stuff and trying to negotiate it maybe well. Um, and with all of the hurricane that's going on down there, one of the things that came up was kind of, the you have to make the standard joke about building an ark, right? Like, he's a, my friend Chris is a kind of a Moses kind of character anyway, so it kind of works for him. And so we kind of, we kind of chuckled about that. Pastor jokes, man. What are you gonna do? Like, oh, it's horrible. But it all, whenever I think about, this, there's no tiny bunch of scripture that more has been built on than I think the description of the design characteristics of the ark. Okay, nerd out Bible time. I hope everybody's ready. Yeah, bring your, Greek lexicon and we'll all have some fun with this. That it's actually 3 verses of Bible, that 3 verses from chapter 6 in Genesis that actually tell us what the ark is supposedly looks like. Now, there are people down in Kentucky, there are people who have dedicated their lives to analyzing and trying to build the ark, trying to find remnants of an ark. Like literally, people have spent their whole lives looking for and contending with this stuff. Now, I'm not. This isn't to criticize them necessarily, but this is to say, they're taking a lot out of a little here. I mean, you can go to Kentucky and you can go to I forget what it's called. I think it's Creation Museum or Creation Time Museum or something. And there's a full-size ark built to the specifications that are in Bible. It is, or supposedly they say, because you got to fill in a lot of details. But what I think is interesting is the details that we do have and what it tells us about what it is to confront overwhelming things in our lives. And whether they're great losses. I think about, I lost my dad this year, and it has been an overwhelming loss. And not that it's destroyed me, but it's one of these things that I can't fully get my arms around. And I think this is right and true for all of us in the loss of a parent. I don't think I'm weird that way. I think that's probably one of the few ways that I'm actually normal. But these great movements of our lives, these great floods that overwhelm us, whether they're floods of grief or maybe they're floods of goodness, maybe they're these wonders in which the world gets where our world is cleaned out, where we get this do-over, where we're I always think there are life's a little like a punctuation. Some movements are just the end of a sentence, and they're a period. Some movements of our lives and changes are the end of a paragraph. We're really coming to a new idea. But some are actually the changes and the ends of chapters, and even into new books within the entire book, even with new segments, new ways of being. And when we encounter these flood moments, not just what's going on in Naples, but also the floods of our lives, I think there's when we look at what God tells Noah to build, there's actually a few things in here that are I think are really fascinating, and that actually have great wisdom for us in how how we're to lean into our faith in times like these. And and the great G.K. Chesterton said, the thing about times like these is that there's always been times like these. The things that we're contending with are not new things in the life of humans, and that our ancient ancestors have great wisdom through God's grace for us in Bible time. So anyway, let's read some Bible. So here is Genesis 6, verse 14. It's 3 verses. This is so. This is what God says to Noah: Make yourself an ark of gopher wood. Make rooms in the ark and cover it inside and out with pitch. Okay, so good so far. This is how you shall make it. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits. Its width shall be 50 cubits, and its height 30 cubits. You shall make a window for the ark, and you shall finish it to a cubit from above. Set the door of the ark on its side, and you shall make it with lower, second, and third decks. So, so that if you go to these museums and you go to these places, they have this, that often there are ramps inside, and there's all these things. Bible doesn't say anything about ramps. Bible doesn't say anything. These are the full design characteristics of the ark that we talk about. The first thing I think is so fascinating, and maybe the greatest thing I think is so fascinating about it. So a cubit, by the way, is the length from one's wrist to one's elbow. It is generally about a foot. That was now everybody's cubit is different, right? So who knows how big Noah's cubit was, but it's generally, this is the length of a cubit. So you get about 300 feet long, about 50 feet wide ish, kind of is what the design what the actual size of it was. And you can go to Kentucky and see, God love them, the investment of resources in building a real life size one of these, supposedly, and filling in a lot of the blanks in there about how that thing is supposed to be constructed. But the first thing is this weird window thing, which I think is probably the most compelling of the whole thing. Right? What does it say? It doesn't say anything about a rudder, a keel, a sail, rigging, nothing. But it says there's going to be a window. One window in a 300-foot vessel with 3 decks, with 30 feet tall, 50 feet wide, 300 feet long. And how big is the window? A cubit by a cubit. That big. That's how big the window is. And that in that window is all of the interaction with the outside world. That's the window the raven will come through. That's the window the dove will come through. The door is on the side. If you open the door, you take in water. It doesn't work out. So the door stays closed. I think this is a beautiful image of what it is when we enter these difficult moments of life, these hard moments, the great storms of our days, the great wind blows, the great floods of our hours, or even when we feel like we're in that state. This notion that is our understanding. The what we can see outside of versus what's going on inside is literally a tiny hole compared to the great vessel and compared to all that's going on around it. We can't see to the left or right. We can't see fore or aft. We can only see up. We can only see light. We can only see that which is above us. And that in a tiny glimpse. We have a problem of understanding in the 21st century. We have a problem understanding one another. We have a problem understanding ourselves. We have a problem understanding what's going on in the world. We have an understanding problem. And I'm going to suggest to you that's not necessarily bad. That's not necessarily means that the world is broken or means that we're broken. I think it means that we are as we are in a great storm, in a great movement, in a great sweeping of the Spirit, in a great flood where the things we used to navigate by, the streets we used to walk down, don't look the same and are overwhelmed themselves. The institutions we used to lean upon, we even question. All of it has this way about it of injecting amazing chaos and amazing misunderstanding into the midst of our lives. But I'd suggest that's as it should be. That what we're really given is a tiny, tiny window of understanding. You know, I first encountered this reading a book called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. If you ever, it's a great read. Old hippie book, fantastic though. Sorry, no insult to the hippies. Just, but in it, Pierzig talks about motorcycle repair. It's Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, after all. And he talks about stripping down a motorcycle in order to work on it, and that the more you strip down, the more you get into the detail of every piece and part, that the motorcycle actually doesn't become less complicated. It actually becomes more complicated. You know, you can point at a motorcycle and you can say, okay, there it is. You recognize it. It's got handlebars, two wheels, an engine, like, got it. But when we start to break that down into smaller and smaller components, oh, here's a clutch of a motorcycle. Well, poof, all of a sudden, that's all kinds of pieces. Now inside that clutch are also, all those pieces are made out of metal. All those metals have particular temperances, particular ways in which they're made, particular hardnesses, all of which have to be correct. And all that the more that we think, the more you break things down, the simpler they get. But actually, it's quite the opposite. The more we break things down, the more we find the multiplicity of complexity throughout creation and throughout everything. The natural world is filled with this. Look, it's a bird. Bird. Look into the specificity of that bird, whether it's a crane or a cormorant or a songbird. They do radically different things with radically different components, with radically different ways of eating and mating and living in the world. That, yeah, they might all have wings, but none of them are doing the same thing in the same way, really. Are you seeing what I'm saying? That the world is actually, the storm that rages outside of us all the time is actually incredibly, incredibly complicated. And that what we're given to understand, even if we're not in the flood, is a tiny little hole, a tiny little bit of understanding. And here's the thing. That's enough. Here's the promise. That's enough to get us there. That's not the way, that's not a failure. It's not a bug. It's actually a feature. That through our tiny window, through our tiny cell, through our tiny little square, we encounter all in the world that we can manage to deal with, that we can manage to account for. And sometimes even more than we can account for. That we're actually shut out from so much of this complexity. We're shut out from the raging seas that are around us. We are protected from it by our design. We say we want to understand more. God help us if we understand more. Really, truly, I mean that. God help us if in our greater understanding. Saint Teresa of Lisieux said that if you want to truly pray a radical prayer, like a prayer that will bust you open, that will just change you, and change you both in good ways and incredible ways, pray to see as God sees. Pray to see as God sees. Pray to see with a wider understanding than the understanding that you have right now. And see what happens when you say to God, make that window a little bigger. It will radically transform us. One of the great, and there's some real functions behind this and some real reasons. One of the great theologians was Soren Kierkegaard. You still can't go wrong with Kierkegaard. He still holds up after so many years, and at the end of his life, he wrote this little tiny book, in which and when all of his theological musings, and which are tight and solid and incredibly beautiful, in all of his musings and all of his work, he writes this little tiny thin book. And in it, he talks about the understanding of life. And he says, life is understood backwards, but must be lived forwards. And when we seek to understand it backwards, we look at our lives and we see it as if there was a hand upon our lives, steering and guiding and pointing us to places at critical junctures. You see, one thing about the ark, it has no sails. It has no rudder. It has no steerage. It is simply brought along by the wind of the storm itself. Further in the book, it talks about, in Genesis 8, it talks about how God made a wind to pass over the earth. God carries the ark to deposit it on the mountain. God carries your life to deposit it where you are going. And that your little window of understanding is not your failure, but it is actually your beauty and your protection. It is actually your provision and God's care for you. And it is enough. It is enough to know that which you know. It is enough to look at your understanding, to look at the window above you. And as you do, you will see the ravens that you need to see. You will see the doves bringing olive branches and find peace in the places that you need to find peace. It is when we kind of hunker down below decks and hide out, particularly in the bottom, most base natures of our being, that those lower deck places where we find ourselves in struggle and in pain. You know, when we go hang out with the bilge rats and the dung, it's hard for us to look and lift our eyes upward. You know, if you've ever been in our church, if you've ever been at First Congregational Church, and if you've never been here, please come. Please come to, not to see me or have coffee with me. If anybody wants to have coffee, I'm always game. I love coffee. Come and see the building. Come and see what it has to say to you. Because one of the things about our sanctuary space, which I find, it's the most, I've been to a lot of churches all over, but I think the beauty of the simplicity of it, one of the things that is impossible to do is to spend time in that space and not have your eyes drawn upward. The brilliance of its design, the brilliance of its beauty is its whole, that you have a kinetic response to it. Like you have a bodily response to the architecture of the space in which it draws your eyes upward. And in that drawing, just as we stand in our little arcs and being drawn along by the wind that God brings us, thinking sometimes we're captains of our own ship, when really God draws us along and invites us to look upwards to the heavenly things of our life, to the heavenly places of our life, to the heavenly light of our life. And in the days of storms and the days of struggle, to let it be enough. Because God's great provision for us, God's great providence for us, is that we don't have to steer the ark. We don't have to fight the storms around us. We don't have to try and destroy or conquer all the things out there. But it is ours to preserve that which is good and true and beautiful within us, and to look to the heavenly light, to be drawn to our heavenly home. The great Abraham Heschel puts it this way: the beginning of our happiness lies in the understanding that life without wonder is not worth living. Friends, your little window in the world is enough, because it counts and it places you not in the place of being at the helm and controlling all things, not in the place of despair, hiding in the bowels of the boat, but it places you being drawn along by the force of the one who made you in an incredibly wonder-filled way. That in all the struggles of our life, we may be able to open to the wonder and the awe of it. Not because we've got it all figured out, not because we're a doctor who's delivered too many babies, not because we've seen behind the material veil of how all the little atoms and the quarks and the things all work together so that we have this existence knocked, but that we might open our eyes heavenward, filled with wonder every day, even though there may be a storm that rages around us, and even though we may not have the full picture all the time. All right, friends, that's my hope for you today. Peace and grace to you. And we'll pick it up tomorrow. We'll be off campus tomorrow, I think, but we'll still meet. Peace and grace to you on this day, that you might have joy and wonder as you look through your little window. Peace and grace, my friends.